So I was telling you the story about Jimmy Brogan calling me and setting up for me to come down and work with him and Jay Leno at the Comedy and Magic Club in Hermosa Beach, California. This is the second part of that story is the day that I went down there. I think it was 2006, if I'm not mistaken. And I called Jimmy Brogan, who was Jay Leno's head writer for The Tonight Show for the first 9 years after Jay took over. And he's one of Jay Leno's best friends. They've been friends since they were young comedians. And so Jimmy told me, he said, now look, Jay goes down there and works the Comedy and Magic Club every Sunday night like clockwork. They know he's coming, and they plan on the event. What he does is he goes down there and he works jokes that he and his writers have been working on for the Tonight Show for the next week. And he comes down there and he does some stand-up of his own. And believe me, Jay Leno is a good stand-up comedian. When he's not, if you ever watch him on the Tonight Show, that's not his typical stand-up. That's stuff that was written by him and his writers, and it's topical stuff. It's not the personal stuff Jay talks about in his regular show. He's been one of my favorite comedians since I first saw him on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, because he's just funny. He's a funny guy. And in fact, back in that day, he was the road comic that all other road comics wanted to be. And just a very funny comedian. I couldn't wait to meet him. So Jimmy told me, he said, now what's going to happen is Jay's going to arrive in his car in the front of the club. Security is going to clear the street in front of the club so that nobody can get near him when he comes up in his car, so that he doesn't get mugged before he gets into the comedy club. And he's going to pull up, and he'll get out, and the security will usher him in the back door to the back, in the back of the club, where there's a big area back there, and then into the green room and around backstage. He said, so security's not going to let anybody get near him, and nobody knows who you are. He said, now I'll be riding with Jay. When we get there, I want you to be in this little shop that's next door to the comedy club. There's a little shop in there that sells T-shirts and souvenirs and things like that. And he said, go in there and talk to the manager and just stand there in the doorway of that club, of that store, and the security will clear the streets and they won't bother with you because you're in another patron's store. So just stand in the doorway there and security won't mess with you. And as soon as you see us pull up, and there'll be no doubt that it's Jay Leno by the way security acts, come out the door of the store and start walking toward us. And as soon as you see me. As soon as I see you, I will shout out, hey, Spirit Walker, over here. And that way security will know you're with us. And you can walk straight on through to us. I said, okay, sounds like a plan. So I go down to Hermosa Beach, and before the show, about 30 or 40 minutes before the show, I go and I stand in the doorway because he said they will literally get there no more than 30 minutes before the show. So I was there a little earlier than that. And I walked over and I talked to the man in the store, and he was very polite, and he told me stories about famous comedians that he'd seen going in and out of the Comedy Magic Club. And he said, what are you doing hanging around? And I said, I'm waiting for Jay Leno. And he said, oh, are you a friend of his? And I said, no, I'm not really. This is the first time I'm going to meet him, but I know Jimmy Brogan. And he said, oh, okay. So we waited, and when they pulled up, he says to me, that's one of Jay's cars. And so I stepped out onto the stoop of the store, and I saw the car pull up and parked on the right side of the road, facing traffic. And Brogan gets out of the driver's side of the car into the street, and he's a tall, lanky man, and he just unrolled out of this small little sports car and shut the door behind him. And Jay Leno gets out on the curbside, which is the passenger side of the car, and he gets out, and he doesn't have a jacket on, and he goes around and he pops open the trunk, and he's getting his jacket out as I'm start to walk down the street. And Brogan does just what he said. He sees me and he says, Spirit Walk over here. And security let me go by, and I walked around to the back car. And that's when I realized that, because I thought, wow, Jay Leno let Jimmy drive his car. That's incredible. And then when I got up to the car, I realized, no, it's a foreign job, and the driver's seat is on the other side. Jay was actually driving, and Jimmy said he couldn't have curled in behind the steering wheel anyway because it's too small of a car for him. So we walk around, and Brogan says, "Hey Jay, I'd like you to meet my friend Spirit Walker." And I extended my hand to shake Jay Leno's hand for the first time. Two things struck me immediately. First thing that struck me was how huge his head is. He's like a human bobblehead doll. Not only is his chin big, but his head is oversized, and it's big. In person, it looks much bigger. The second thing that struck me was how rough his hands were. When I shook his hand, it was like he had a sandpaper covering his palm. The man was not someone who just sat around and did nothing with soft little show business hands. His hands were rough and just like I said, sandpaper. Because he works on cars all the time, and oil and grease and all these things on his hands. And he has a working man's handshake. Trust me, Jay Leno is not just a comedian, not just a TV host. He's a man's man. He loves cars, and he showed it that day to me. That was my first impression of Jay Leno when I met him in person. My first impression of Jay Leno when I saw him on TV was funny. I hope you've enjoyed this story. I'll continue it in another video later. It's nice having this chat with you.